Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Magician with a Microphone podcast. Today is Thursday, February 3rd. Yesterday was 2/2/22, and I kind of cheated. So, I made the goal where I wanted to witness 2/2/22 at 2:22, right? Well, I missed 2:22 by like 10 minutes. But I realized, because I was in the car and coming back from Shafriho, the restaurant I perform at, and I was like, you know what? What about military time? 22. That's 10 p.m. And I'm in the car with my girlfriend, and I'm like, I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna be able to get this. So I turned on military time, and it was like 10:19, so that would be 22:19, and I was able to screenshot it. So I got 2:22. Or no, 2/2/22 at 22:22. So I kind of felt accomplished. But then I realized, wait a minute, everybody's going to be doing this again on the 22nd. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that again on the 22nd. I'm going to set my clock to military time, and I'm going to get 2/22/22 at 22:22, because the last time for the next 11 years we'll be able to do that, because the next time we are able to do that, it'll be 3/3/33 at 3:33 p.m. So I think as far as like the 2/22/22 at 22:22, that's a lot of twos. I think that'll be the last time ever in our existence we'll ever see that. Anyway, enough with that ranting. Today's going to be a really special podcast. My guest today is Greg Dwyer. Greg is a motivational speaker. He is a minister. He is a traveler. He is a former I believe he was a former magician at one point in his high school days. And he studied hypnosis, public speaking, a lot of psychology. He's one of the smartest people I've ever talked to, and probably one of the people that I enjoy talking to the most. I was just on his podcast, the Diamond Mind Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio. And I'll have the link for that down below. You can go and check him out. But Greg and my friend Rich are who I consider human ASMR. So I'm really happy to have Greg on today. And it's going to be a little weird. I'm going to let you guys know ahead of time. I'm doing this call through Zoom. And I've never recorded a call through Zoom before. So this is going to be interesting. I don't even know if it's going to work. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But hey, let's try it, I told Greg on his podcast when I was on last week that I promise I will watch my language. I did warn him this is a sort of PG-13 podcast, and his podcast is completely G-rated because of some of the people that listen to his show. But hopefully, if he's able to share this with with his followers and his listeners, I won't offend anyone with any language or anything, even though. I'm a firm believer that it's pretty ridiculous to get offended by swear words, because they're just words, That would be like if we were to make the word mirror a bad word, you know what I mean? So, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Really quick, I got a couple of shows coming up. If anybody's in the Connecticut area wants to come and see me, or if I'm going to be in your area, I just booked a show. I'm extending my tour. I'm rebuilding and extending my tour. I've got a name for my show now, and I'm going to be revealing that next week, because I'm going to start announcing my tour dates and everything for the summer and the fall and the winter. But I just booked a show in Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm waiting to hear back from Foxborough, Massachusetts. I just heard back from a theater in Philadelphia today. And then I'm going to, my usual spots, the Bijou in Bridgeport. I might be doing a show in New Britain, Connecticut. I got to wait on that. Peabody, Massachusetts. I'll be there at the beginning of October. I'm going out to Chicago hopefully at the end of November. And I got a couple of other things brewing, too. I've got the show with the Gem Room in Naugatuck on June 11th. Tickets are on my website, www.chrislangellmagic.com. It's all in the description below. And then I might be doing a fundraiser for the Portuguese Club, the Naugatuck Portuguese Club, on May 7th. Not sure yet. Got to adjust times and dates and figure out how I'm going to get a lot of people in there, because if I don't, I have to pay for it. So, and I don't want to do that. So, Without any further ado, guys, let's get Greg on here. Again, I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to this Zoom thing, so just bear with me. Let me see if I can get this. Well, all right, guys, I got this working somehow, and I managed to be able to get the recording to pick up. And it's a hard way to describe how I'm doing this, so I'm not going to explain it. But I have Greg here. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for inviting me on your podcast.
Yeah, no problem. I figured I want to start getting guests on here. And I did the show with Rich the other day, and we got a bunch of people complimenting me on the interview, and two, on the fact that it was it actually worked out very well. So I'm hoping that, this can be a constant thing. So, I explained to everybody that you are a plethora of things. You are a motivational speaker, you are a traveler, you are a former magician, you've studied with people all over the world. Do you want to give yourself a little bit, or give them a little bit of a further in detail look on yourself? Just talk about yourself, put yourself over. What would you like these wonderful people to know about you?
Well, I looked at my life a couple years ago and thought to myself, I have so many different compartments. I do this, I do that. But really, I think what it's all about is making change, and making change in myself, and then helping other people change as well. So I started as a magician. My uncle showed me a coin trick. I think I was in 4th grade. He held up a quarter, made it disappear, and that was it. I just couldn't believe it. So that next year, I got a magic kit for Christmas, got a couple books. One thing led to another. I ended up in Tannen's Magic down in New York, and I was just totally obsessed with magic. I would say all the way through grammar school, all the way through high school, that was my identity. And then I walked away from it, went to graduate school, became a minister, and I kind of put that to the side, but it never really left me. And then I bumped into the teachings of Tony Robbins around the year 2000. And then over the last 20 years, I've kind of incorporated what I learned from magic, what I've learned from the church, and what I've learned from Tony Robbins. And it really comes down to flourishing, which means reaching your full potential, whatever that is. If you're on the street and you're homeless, maybe that means getting out of your car and finding a place to live. If you got $100,000 in the bank, maybe that means becoming a millionaire. Whatever it is, whatever people are looking for, I see myself as a facilitator to help people break through their barriers so that they can reach their full potential. So I started a company a couple years ago called Diamond Mind Potential, and it's really all about transformation and reaching your full potential. So I've kind of put it all together, the magic, the ministry, the personal growth, and I've kind of not so much scattered, because I see myself as one person with one mission. Does that make sense?
No, it does. So let me ask you this. When you decided that you wanted to go from being a magician to a motivational speaker, how exactly did you get started on that path? Because, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to advertise. Especially considering you can't book yourself as a motivational speaker at a kid's birthday party. You have to look at corporate, events and, other types of directions like that. You can't just book a motivational speaker at an average everyday event. So how did you figure out how to start marketing yourself to that? And tell us about a couple of the first gigs that you ever did doing it.
Yeah, well, it was a process. It didn't happen overnight. I was in Cleveland, Ohio, my first church. I was making $18,000 a year. I think the secretary was making about 15. And somebody approached me about direct marketing, multi-level marketing. And my first reaction was, no way. I'm not a salesman. Don't want to get involved with that. But I looked at, going to school for 4 years of college, 4 years of graduate school, back in the 90s, making $18,000. And I said, this has got to change. So I got involved in marketing, and I got involved in sales, and it was a rough road. It didn't happen overnight, but I was introduced to personal growth then. And then fast forward like 4, 5, 6 years into the future, I get a phone call from a guy in Texas. He has a day planner. He fell in love with my passion for the day planner, and we went into business together. He produced a day planner for people that were in direct sales. I put together a 12-month program. It was based on a diamond. It was based on a baseball diamond, actually. Home base, first base, second base, third base. And I taught this class for 12 months, teaching people how to go through the sales cycle. And it was something that I had done, and so I was teaching it to people. And so that transformed into motivational speaking. So it was like one step, taking a foot to the left and a foot to the right, moving in that direction. I got to say, it didn't happen overnight. And so I think one of the first groups I've ever spoke for was an Avon group here in Connecticut. I also spoke for IBM. That was another company I spoke for. Another company I spoke for was Isogenics. And in the last 5 years, I've kind of really tighten my message around the topic of focus, because I feel that most people are totally distracted. There's just too much information out there. And I think you can't do everything in life. You can't be a magician and a juggler and a comedian and, run a multi-level marketing business at the same time selling soap with Amway. It's impossible. You got to hunker down. You got to focus on one thing. And I think what happens is a lot of people, they dabble. They don't focus on what's really important because they don't even know what's important. So it's a process. I think anybody that's listening to me, if people think that whatever they want to do is going to happen overnight, they're kidding themselves.
Okay, very interesting. Now, it's funny because you say that you can't do all of that stuff all at once, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, damn, I don't even juggle or tell jokes or anything. I'm just a magician, which is why, you seem to have gotten really good at the business behind show business, and if anything, encouraging the people who are able to work in the business of show business. Because let me tell you something. You bring up focus. That is something that's very important with putting together a magic show or a comedy show or really anything. Is you have to be able to keep yourself, on the ball, on the... You have to... The goal has to be in mind. I think that's the way I'm trying to put this. And, I found myself dozing off. I found myself, losing track of what I'm doing. So, I think somebody like you to come along and help somebody like me is definitely essential in the entertainment world. So you said that you worked for IBM. You said how many bigger businesses have you been able to work with, and what were your experiences with them like? I mean, because I can't imagine that, because you think of a name like IBM, or you think of a name like, Stanley Black & Decker or Travelers Insurance, and some of those guys are pretty hard to crack. I mean, are you able to get through to a lot of these people? Like, do they, obviously they enjoy you, but do you ever have a harder time getting through and trying to get your point across?
It's really a numbers game. I came back from Vegas probably like 15, 20 years ago, and I asked this guy at a convention, I said, what's the secret to this? Because this was in direct sales. And he says, I'm going to tell you what the secret is. He says, the people that are really good at this, they come from a background of real estate. They come from a background of sales. And I said, really? He goes, yeah, the average person doesn't live on the phone. The average person doesn't prospect. He says, if you really want to be good at this, he says, I'm going to give you a secret. And I'm going to give it to you. And I said, okay, tell me. He says, they're telemarketers. So this was back in 1999, the year 2000. I came back to Connecticut because I was living in Cleveland, Ohio. And I opened up the newspaper. I don't even think they have newspapers anymore. But I opened up the newspaper and I found an ad.
Oh, hold on. I think I lost you. You there, Greg? Hold on. I think I lost you. Hold on, we're going to have technical difficulty here. Give me a second, guys.
And there was about 20 people in this call center, and out of the 20 people, there was 3 people. I still remember their names.
Hey, Greg.
Joe.
Greg.
Yeah.
I lost you for about 30 seconds there. Can you repeat what you just said?
Oh, okay. So I found a guy that told me the secret to this.
Yeah, that's where I lost you.
Yeah, so direct sales and really had to do with being a telemarketer. So I got a job as a telemarketer. And when I walked in, I asked him, I said, look, I really want to learn these skills. I should be paying you, but they paid me $10 an hour. And they also paid me, I think it was like 5% commission. And there were 3 people in the room that really knew what they were doing. One was a guy by the name of Steve. The other one was Carmen. The other one was Joe. And so I made friends with these people. And in the process of becoming friendly, I modeled these people. I listened to what they were doing. And within a year, I was a manager of the call center. So I kind of learned the techniques. When it comes to prospecting, it's just a matter of making the phone calls, sending the emails, doing the follow-up, and just simply being persistent. It doesn't matter if it's a library, a school, IBM. You're just looking for people that are looking for you. It's not that difficult, really. It's just you have to wrap your mind around it.
So how do you calm your nerves when you're doing that? Because when I first started learning how to market and cold calling and everything, I got so nervous and I would mess up a lot. Like, there were times when I was making phone calls and I would stop halfway through and be like, hold on, let me start over, let me gather my thoughts. What kind of, I'm not going to say tricks of the trade because it's way too cliche for me, but what kind of methods did you use to try to overcome your fear of, if you had a fear of talking to people? Because nobody ever wants to be rejected, and that's basically the job description of a telemarketer. So what did you do to get over that?
Well, when I was working for this company in Watertown or Waterbury, Connecticut, it wasn't about me. I wasn't selling myself, It's harder to sell yourself than another product, right? So there was no fear of rejection. In fact, it became a game, right? So I learned really early on that it's not rejection, it's just a game. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, here's a secret that is a trick that I've learned from other people. And I'll tell you, Chris, it has changed my life. You go to the dollar store, or you go to Walmart, or you go to one of those, box stores, and you buy a kitchen timer. It's that simple. That simple. And you decide, you make a decision that you're going to prospect for a half an hour or an hour. And what I do is, on a daily basis, sometimes I prospect for an hour, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3, and an hour of follow-up. But the key is the timer. I'll set the timer. Like today I got on the phone at 1:30. I set the timer to 2:30, and I sat and I made phone calls. And when that timer goes off, I'm done. I went to Dunkin' Donuts. I got a coffee. I came back, and then I set it again to do follow-up. It is the secret weapon.
So you literally make a timer against your... Oh, wow. All right, so... A couple of podcasts ago, I talked about my marketing strategy, and I was telling, and I remember you asked me too on your podcast, what was it, last week, about how I market shows and everything. I usually set a time between 11 o'clock in the morning to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just go ham on it. I'll be honest. It's like, I'm relentless. I never thought about the egg timer because that right there, it puts a little bit of pressure on you to get things done, but at the same time, it condenses your time so that way you have no choice but to try to make that goal, So speaking of goals, I want to move into something else that you I was doing for a while, and I'm very ashamed to admit I have stopped doing it, and I don't know why. I think it was just because of the stress of 2020. The gratitude books. That you talk about in your lecture, and the 7 things that I'm grateful for. I was doing that religiously at one point, and then things just got really stressful and I stopped. But how did you decide to come up with the gratitude, setting goals for yourself? Because you talk about all of this in your lecture. how did you come up with this? Like, what was your strategy when you were building your lecture, and how did you figure that you were going to talk about setting goals and gratitude and life building, basically?
Well, first of all, I didn't come up with it. The gentleman I learned it from is Jack Canfield. And so many years ago, I think the year was 2009, I went to see Jack Canfield. And this is the funny thing. I was sitting about 3/4 of the way back in the audience. The place was packed, maybe 250, 300 people, right? So Jack is doing his stick, and he's, talking and whatever he's doing. And so halfway through his presentation, he goes, I need a volunteer, right? You following me?
Okay.
So everybody puts their hands up. Everybody's like, oh, pick me, right? I'm embarrassed to say this, but I stood up and I walked towards Jack and I said, Jack, I'm your volunteer. So while everybody else was begging and putting up their hands and saying, please pick me, I just stood up, walked straight towards Jack Canfield and said, I'm your volunteer, Jack.
Now, that's the way that, I can say I've never had something. I can't say I've never had somebody do that at my show. I've never had a grown adult do that at my show.
Well, it helps that I'm not really an adult internally. I'm very much like a child. And I'm thinking, well, what's possible here? He's going to pick somebody? No, I'm going to pick myself. So I went up and I was on stage with Jack Canfield, and he was doing this demonstration. And afterwards, I bought his gratitude journal, and that was 2009. And I was okay at it. Like you're telling me you did it, then you stopped. That was me. That was 2009. But once 2010 rolled around, I got really good at it. And if I missed a day, I went back. If I couldn't think of something, I put water, air, food, clothing, housing, you know what I mean? Just
Right.
simple stuff. But what I learned over the years, and I've been doing this since 2009, is it really rewires your brain for looking for things that are, like today, I sold somebody. And yesterday I sold 2 people. So that's pretty easy when that happens, right? You can write that down. Or you can say, hey, it's raining today. Really not snow, and it's not going to be really bad. You can put down whatever you want. What most people do is they struggle to find things. But after a while, you start looking for these things. So number one, I didn't learn it myself. I didn't think of it myself. I learned it from Jack. And as far as having it in my lecture, in the last 5 years, my lecture has really grown and changed. So I really don't talk that much about gratitude. I did when I first started. It's a part of my lecture, but it's not really apparent. I really talk about focus, and focus and gratitude do go hand in hand.
All right, so I want to tie in what I was talking about before with this, because I did bring up when you were first getting started with motivational speaking and everything like that, how you transitioned from a magician to a motivational speaker. And it was a couple of months ago where I was watching one of your, were you at a library early, No.
It was September. It was Granby, Connecticut.
September, Granby. Yes, you were streaming it actually on Zoom. So when you first started doing your lecture, which it was called what? The Magic of Communication, correct?
Yeah, that was back in 2016.
Okay. From your first lecture to now, what changed? How did you originally structure your first lecture? How did you learn from that, and what made you want to construct it into what it is now? Because you did say that you're consistently working on it.
Yeah, I was bad. When I started in 2016, I put together a good show, but it was really, really, really dependent on props. I did 12 magic tricks in 60 minutes, and it was a good show. If I were to go back and look at it now, I'd probably be embarrassed, but I didn't really know what the heck I was doing. All I knew is I wanted to communicate something, and I just put myself out there. It's like if you said to me, hey, let's just meet for coffee, I'd get in the car and start driving, which is really not a good thing because I need to know where I am and I need to know where you are so I can get there the quickest. The biggest thing that has changed in the last 5 years is me and the people that I've met along the way. Like Kenton Nepper is a mentor of mine. Richard Osterlin, I met him a couple years ago in Mohegan Sun, and he had some great advice about taking props out of your show. So now I do 60 to 90 minutes, and I only have a dash of magic. So I would say 5 years ago, a lot of people would say, what the heck are you, a motivational speaker or a magician? Today, it's very clear I'm a business speaker. And I do a little bit of magic, but not a lot. And then there's another guy I hired. His name is Neil Gordon. I paid him $2,500 for, I think it was 3 months worth of work, where he looked at my video, he looked at my script, he rearranged my show, my lecture, he tore it apart, and he gave me coaching on how to present an idea, and he calls it the silver bullet. The silver bullet in my show is worth $2,500, if not more, because the worst thing a motivational speaker can bring to the table is unclarity. And unfortunately, when I started, that's where I was at. I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
Wow. All right. Yeah, and you know, it's funny because I'm thinking about what I do. So, as a magician, depending on the kind of show that you're doing, you either want a lot of props or you want next to nothing. For a kid's magic show, you want a lot of colorful props, you know, gag tricks and everything, you know, hippity-hop rabbits, you want, you know, vanishing silk, something like that. But I've also found when I do my close-up magic shows, I have a notebook, I have a deck of cards, I have maybe a Sharpie marker, and a couple of coins. And depending on the audience that I'm performing for, you know, that's the kind of, you know, show that I would give. And you know, because going back to the show, or not to the show, to the lecture that you did at that Granby Library, there was that one trick at the very end, and I'm not going to give it away, but it absolutely blew my mind. And it was that kind of demonstration that you were giving that reminded me of my close-up magic show. Now, obviously, my show isn't a motivational show. I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to mess with your head a little bit and I'm going to make you think about this all night. Your show actually has a message. So if you had to sum up your show, your lecture, your, you know, just your overall goal that you're trying to achieve, you know, when you do your lectures, what would that be? Because when I think of my shows, whether it's my kid's show where it's got a lot of props or it's my adult show where it's next to nothing, I have one goal in mind, and that's to entertain everybody. What is your ultimate goal at the end of your lectures?
That's a wonderful question. It's almost like you're just tossing me the softball. What you're talking about is the
I'm shooting from the hip, Greg.
I know. Yeah, we didn't script this.
No.
So what you're asking me is the controlling idea.
Exactly.
So when you sit down and you watch a movie, there has to be one point, one strong point. When you pick up a book, there has to be one strong point. Whether it's a book, a lecture, a movie, a play. You know, you go to Broadway and see a play. So what we're talking about is a controlling idea. And I'm working on this for a book. The book is going to be based on the lecture. But here it is in a sentence or two. Distraction is the enemy. That's the problem. Distraction is the enemy, and most people think that willpower and discipline is the answer to distraction, and it's not. What causes people to focus is importance. So if I were to tie it down to a few words, it's this. Importance directs focus. Now that's 3 words. So that's my campaign. That's my controlling idea. And so when I talk to business people, I say, listen, you think that your people, your employees are going to stay focused because of discipline or because of willpower or the carrot or the stick. It's not going to happen. They're going to be looking at their cell phones. They're going to be goofing off. Heck, today in the year 2022, people don't even want to show up for work. So the key to this is importance directs focus. That's my controlling idea. That's what I paid somebody $2,500 to come to. Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy, but at the same time, it also demonstrates just how important simplicity is.
Yes, because if it's complex, people are going to do it. They're not going to do it.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about it the other day, and I think about you all the time. I know it's weird to say, but I listen to your podcasts more than I should. I describe you as ASMR. Your voice, just for some reason, is very soothing, and the fact that you're one of the very few people that I actually know who, just about 100% of the time, know what you're talking about, and can get a point across to just about anyone. It's funny that you bring up the discipline and everything like that, because I was on your website earlier. I was trying to find your email so I can send you the link to the Zoom call, and I failed your test, and I got the email that said, hey, you failed the test. But
You took the test.
I took the test.
So cool.
I was like,
so cool.
I was like, hey,
we gotta tell people how to get there. Is that okay?
Oh yeah. Actually, we'll do a plug in a little bit. I mean, we're not done by a long shot. I mean, this.
I would love people to take the test like you and either fail or pass. It's not an easy test.
I'm not going to give it away. Now that you say that, I'm not going to give away. I only got 40% on the test, but I love the outcome of it. It made me think for a second. Wow, what the hell was I talking about? Yeah, so anyway.
We're talking about focus.
Yes, I got to focus. I've got a motivational speaker who teaches focus, and I'm getting distracted here. Discipline, I guess, huh? I listen to your podcast all the time. All right, the Diamond Mind radio show on Building Fortunes Radio. I have the link in the description below. For the people who are listening to this on YouTube, and for the people who are going to be listening to this in the future, I would definitely suggest you guys give Greg a follow and a listen, and maybe subscribe to a couple of the things that he puts out. I was listening to the show from, this is a long time ago. This is the last time I was on your television show. You were talking about the show that you had with Jim Reed. And the show was about your story. And so far we've talked about your story. We've talked about your beginning. We've talked about your your quest from being a magician to a motivational, from a magician to a minister to a motivational speaker. But there's one thing that we have left out. We have not talked about yet. You have been just about all over the world. And you've been to Israel, what, 11 times? I think 11 or 12 times, something like that?
More like 9 or 10, yeah.
Oh, okay, so I wasn't too far off. I know that at least before, the C word hit, you were traveling all over the place. Germany, England, you're in London for events. How did you start traveling? What was your first major trip? And could you tell us a little bit about, what made you want to start taking people on these exciting, I guess is the word to describe it, adventures that you bring them on?
Well, that's a great question. It started I know that's going to sound trite, but this is true, 100%. It started in my imagination. I'm talking the year 2001, something like that. I wrote down in my journal, this wasn't the gratitude, but just on paper, that I want to go to Fiji, I want to go to Germany, Italy was the number one destination for me to go to. So I wrote down Paris, I wrote down France, I wrote down Ireland, I wrote down all these places. And I got to tell you, Chris, I did not have the means to do this at all. I didn't have the financial means. I didn't have the time away. But I just said, hey, I would love to go to Fiji, love to go to Israel, love to go to Germany, Ireland, UK, all these different places. So one day I get a phone call from a friend of mine. He goes, look, going to Israel, you want to go? I jumped on it. And that was, I want to say that was around the year 1995. So that was kind of like my first exposure to international travel. But in the year 2008, I took a job working for a college in New York, and I was their director of alumni relations. And one of my jobs, which I brought to the table, was alumni travel. And I said to the boss, I said to the president of the school, hey, I would love to take people to Israel. So my first year, 2009, we took 50 some odd people to Israel. We had to turn people away. Then the next year we went to Rome. Then the next year we went to Germany. So while I worked for this college, I learned how to put together travel trips and how to market it. So I was learning as I was going under someone else's watch, making money for them. When I left the college, I think, 2012, 2013, I said to myself, I already know how to do this. I already learned how to do this. So I started putting together my own trips. And so in the last decade, I haven't been everywhere, but I've been to a lot of places. In the last 2 years, I haven't gone anywhere. Haven't really left my basement.
I don't think anyone
tell
has.
you, it all started with a thought. I thought it, I wrote it down, and I kept it in front of me. I think there's a little bit of luck or grace that goes along with this. I wouldn't tell somebody, hey, look, just because you write it down and you think about it, it's going to come true. I've been very lucky. I've been given grace. Like, I think you have to be prepared, and some things work and some things don't work. I mean, we could talk here all afternoon or all evening about things that I put down on paper that never happen. But I will tell you, imagination is really powerful. So that's how it happened. Now I'm focusing more on retreats for business people. So my goal is to have local retreats like here in Litchfield at the Wisdom House, or places in New York or New Jersey where it's a business retreat, and then maybe people can go off and see the Vatican, or they could go off and see a bar in Dublin. But I want to focus more on business. Before, it was just travel for the sake of travel.
So why Israel?
Well, I mean, my roots as a Christian, that was always the first place that I was exposed to. I learned a lot. And then after that, what happened is I got hooked because I became a family member of the people over there. Like right now, I can tell you that I know a handful of people that are like family to me, that have been my guides and my drivers and the people at the hotels. And these people, by the way, haven't worked for the last 2 years, like no income whatsoever. But Israel is a very small country. Everybody knows everybody. And so after going back 9 or 10 times, I'd walk into Jerusalem on the streets and people would stop me and say, hey, I remember you from last year.
Don't you have a friend, who is it? Iyad is your travel guy?
Yeah, we actually put together a GoFundMe, which is www.givebacktobethlehem.com, where we raised, I think, close to $6,000, and our goal is to raise $10,000. This guy's got a wife and 3 kids, hasn't worked in 2 years. It's crazy.
That's insane.
Yep.
It's criminal if you ask me, but we're not going to get into my point of view on that. All right, so let's backtrack this then. Let's tie in a couple of these questions. Have you ever decided that you wanted to go outside of the country and do motivational speeches?
I have, on occasion. A good friend of mine, Ken Dine. Do you know Ken Dine from the UK, a mentalist? Does that ring a bell?
I know the name. Ken Dine, and I know he's got a group that he does. And I can't remember for the life of me what it's called.
It's called Epic. So here's my story.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Back in 2016, I went to a live webinar with Ken Dine. It was about an hour long, and at the end of the hour, he was selling his coaching program for speakers, not necessarily speakers, but magicians, speakers, jugglers who want to learn the business side of show business. So I reached out to him, and he said, hey, look, for $4.95, you can sign up for a month. We're going to send you in the mail the Epic newsletter, and you have access to the back office, and you have access to me for a month. Well, I wanted to cancel, but I didn't. So I found myself paying for it, which was a couple $100 a year, I think. And I stayed with them for a few years, and then eventually he asked me to write for them. So he said, hey, would you mind writing a column? Which I was honored. And then eventually we spoke together in Vegas, and then he asked me to come to London to speak at his conference. So internationally, I can put myself down as an international speaker. But it was a process of just connecting with people. Through him, I met this guy by the name of Tim David. Does that guy ring a bell to you?
Again, I know the name.
Yeah, so Tim was a magician running around the country doing magic shows like crazy. And then he found a wife, and then he became a father, and he came to the conclusion that he couldn't be running and living out of a suitcase, so he became a speaker. And the funny thing about it is this is back when, I guess, Borders was still in operation, and I was in
the
Borders
bookstore
one day, and I saw this book called Magic Words, and I pulled it off the shelf, and I said, this is for me. And then through Ken Dine, I met Tim David, who lives in Massachusetts, about 2 hours away from where we live. And I went up and I became friends with him. We had lunches a couple times, and he was on my podcast. He's been on my television show, and he was very instrumental in helping me, make the transition from magic to motivational speaker. So you never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah, it's very true. Well, it's like you and I met at Phantasma Magic, and you told me about the book that you wrote, which I actually just found. It was buried in my Google Drive. But let's backtrack a little bit about. I did mention earlier how I do listen to your podcast a lot. Let's talk about that. So the Diamond Mind Radio Show. What was your inspiration to start doing a podcast every Sunday? Can you tell us a little bit about the podcast? How, who got you into it? What the topics were at first, and then maybe get into some of your favorite moments on the podcast. Maybe a couple of favorite guests, or cool things you've talked about. Let's start from the beginning of the podcast. What started it?
I don't really remember how I got involved. I have a good friend that lives in Florida. His name is Peter Mingles, and he's involved in direct sales and in marketing. And I've known Peter for over 20 years. I've been to his house. We've been out to dinner. We've gone, to the beach together. I know his family. And I don't know, somehow he offered this podcast to me, and it gave me an offer that I couldn't refuse. And I don't even know what year it was. I mean, I've been doing it for such a long time. I can't even remember when I started, who my first guest was. But I do remember him walking me through it. And it's on Blog Talk Radio. And he gave me the keys to the kingdom, which he doesn't do for a lot of people. I don't think he does it for anybody. But he gave me the keys to the kingdom. I have a 30-minute spot every Sunday night, Eastern Standard Time at 5 o'clock to 5:30. And when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing. I was sweating. I was nervous. And I just went out there and did it. And then halfway through, maybe a couple years into it, I wanted to quit. I'm like, this is a waste of time. But for me, what I love about it is I get to interview people like you. I get to meet people that I would never have met before. Like next 2 weeks from now, I think we're going to do a replay this week, but 2 weeks from now, Greg Gleason, who's traveled on television and all over the world as a magician, as an illusionist, is going to be my guest, and the topic is going to be Doug Henning. And, I've met Greg a couple times at conferences, but I've never had the opportunity to interview him. Other people like John Zaffis, who lives here in Connecticut, that's very much involved with the paranormal, who was connected to the Warrens. I've interviewed him on my television show and podcast. So for me, it really is just simply about having conversations. And as you know, we don't script it. We just have a conversation, which I think a lot of people are looking forward to. They want to hear real conversations like we're having right now.
And I think that's something very important because, so many people nowadays, they listen. I mean, podcasts are a different story, especially lately, with Joe Rogan's podcast and with, like everybody's got a podcast now, and it just seems so fluid and, so natural as opposed to, like, say, an interview on television where, half of the time people have in the back of your mind, oh, well, if it's on television, it's got to be scripted. I've been on your television show, 3 or 4 times now, Mindful Conversations, and let me tell you, it's always fun getting together and doing that, and I really wish that we were able to do that again. And by the way, if you don't have a guest for this Sunday, I'll come back on your show this Sunday, and I'll be a guest for you.
Well, I tell you what's going on. There's a convention called Mindvention that they normally do in Vegas every year, and this year they're doing it online. It was like $200. I think it's Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and I bought it. So these are the top mentalists of the world coming together. One of the guys that's presenting on Monday is Eric Samuels. He's giving a 4-hour presentation on what he does.
Eric Samuels is fantastic. That's going to be a very good lecture.
Yeah, so I think we're going to do a replay, which is, I've been thinking in the back of my head that maybe once a month I'll do a replay. I don't know. I remember Johnny Carson, when he got older, he didn't show up every day. But I don't know. I love networking. And I got to tell you, Chris, The thing that changes people is the books they read, it's the audios they listen to, like personal development, and it's the people they meet. It's the people that you meet that can change your life. And so one of the reasons why I like doing the podcast is you just never know who you're going to run into that might change your life.
No, absolutely. And, with your television show too, So let me ask you this then, tying your television show, Mindful Conversations, in with your podcast, how do you find the people that you're going to get onto your show? How do you reach out to them? Is it word of mouth half the time? Do you ask people? Because I remember you told me about your show, and I ended up telling a couple of my friends. My friend James McCrae of James McCrae Photography, the guy who did my documentary, was on your television show. My friend Pete and Chris, from Pete and Chris Amusements, were on your podcast. So word of mouth is a great thing, but I mean, how do you end up reaching out to people to say, hey, I have a television show or I have a podcast I'd love for you to be on? Like, does it just come up in conversation, or do you actively look for certain people?
No, I think you have to actively look for people. The lady that trained me, I was on her show. She had a hard time in the last year or two finding guests because she just simply didn't do it on a regular basis. So when I was
it's got to be consistent.
What's that?
It's got to be consistent. I noticed that. That's why I try to pump out these podcasts every week, at least maybe once or twice a week.
Yeah, for me, what it was when I started the television show, again, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I really didn't. I remember my first episode. I think, when I walked out of the studio, there must have been an inch of water in my shoes because it was sweating. But what we did is we did 15 minutes of teaching and 15 minutes of interview.
Right.
And we did that for maybe a couple months. I got rid of that, and I said, all right, let's just do a half an hour worth of interviews, which seemed to work. But I was talking to Doug, the producer, we were doing so many shows, like, he would sit down with me and he'd say, like, let's say it's February 3rd. He'd say, Greg, you have so many shows in the can, you don't have to do another show until July. So what happened was I would book time 3, 4, 5 times a month, and we would do 2 shows back to back. So I'd have you on for a half an hour, then I'd have Sally on for half an hour, and we would just record. So it got to the point where I didn't have to recruit anybody because I had like 6 months worth of shows in the can already pre-recorded. But it was just a matter of networking, asking people who they knew, and then, if you're local and you live in Connecticut and I call you up and say, hey, I want to talk to you about your business, would you like to be on my television show? Most people say yes. They're flattered. They want to talk about themselves.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, as much as I hate this word and I hate the concept of it, it's exposure.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, if people say to me, like they say to me all the time, and it doesn't matter if it's a church, a library, a school, or a business, who the heck are you? I say, look, just Google my name. Just go to YouTube and put in my name. You'll find me. You'll see all the shows that I've done. You'll see a sizzle reel. So it's social proof. If you're a magician or a juggler or a stand-up comedian or a motivational speaker, and I go in and type in your name in Google and nothing shows up, I'll tell you, it's going to be hard to book your next show. Yeah,
it's true. And I guess it's partially the reason why I'm such a publicity whore. Let's get into your book. Your book that you had released a couple of years ago. That, like I had said, I had just found it buried in my Google Drive, and I went through it again, and I was reading it, and what was it? The seven steps or something like that? Because I know it's you've got a thing with the number 7.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not 7. I think it's 5.
Maybe it is 5.
What happened was I came back from some convention in Vegas. I think it was around 2016. And I got this idea of creating what they call an evergreen marketing piece, which would be like a lead magnet, right?
Right.
And all I can tell you is I just sat down with a burst of excitement and energy, and I just wrote, Chris. I opened up a notebook and just started writing. I just write, and I didn't stop for like a day or two. I'm exaggerating, but I got really focused, and then I brought it to somebody that does social media or does graphic designs, and I said, look, can you take this and can you reword it? Can you edit it? and could you put nice pictures into it? And I think they quoted me like $500. I think by the end of the day, I spent $700 on it, which is not a lot of money. But it's an ebook. It's what they call a lead magnet. I wouldn't call it a book. Maybe it's a report. But what it talks about is 5 secrets to your success, and it's playing off this idea of a former illusionist. So it begins by talking about magic and David Copperfield and Harry Houdini and some of the techniques that they've used in their performance and how it can apply. But I created that in 2016. It's pretty much evergreen. Like, I can still, with the exception of the photo on the front page, because I think I might change that someday.
Yeah, you got a beard now.
What's that?
You got a beard now. Of course you got to change it.
Well, I showed it to a marketing guy one time, and he goes, "That looks kind of creepy. You look very magic-y." But, anyway, I'm floating a diamond in my hand. But for the most part, I'm very proud of the material that's in the book. And so I think it's a positive message that, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now, if people read it, they'd say, wow, this still applies today.
It's funny because, like I said, I was reading it literally a couple of hours ago, and it does still apply. And, you talk about things in that book, like being able to, you use a quote from Harry Houdini, "My mind is the key that sets me free."
Right.
And you get into the details of, how to think differently, how to put important things in order of importance, how to basically take control of your mind in a way. I think that's the best way I can put it. It's like you're trying to show somebody how they can take control of their mind and not overthink things. And I'm the king of overthinking things. Let me tell you something. When it comes to like building a show or something, or even something simple like rearranging my office at my house, it's like, where does this go? Where does this go? I lose focus. I get distracted. I end up, taking care of 3 other things. So, your topics and your, structure that you had in that book, it really helps you to like sit back and think like, what? Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I gotta, think about doing certain things this way. Maybe I gotta refocus, restructure my head this way.
Can I tell you the secret?
Yeah, I would love to hear the secret.
All right, so here's the secret. I'll give you the acronym. IHS. So I stands for importance. You have to figure out what's really important. Now, that's overwhelming to people if you say, hey, what the heck is important to you in your life? Most people can't tackle that. So you say, okay, what's important for you in 2022? Most people can't handle that either. What about this month? Let's look at February 2022. Well, maybe you can't even wrap your mind around that. So tomorrow, the question is, what's important today? Which is Friday. That's really making it simple. So the first step is discovering with complete clarity what's important. Because there's 100,000 things you could do tomorrow, but what's really important? So that's I. The H stands for habit. Willpower is good. Discipline's good. I think they're great things, but you can get burnt out with discipline. You can get burnt out with willpower. Once you figure out what's really important to you, then it has to become a habit. And habits don't happen overnight. They don't happen in 30, 60 days. More like a couple months, maybe 6 months, right? So we're talking crock pot here. We're not talking microwave. A lot of people dabble and they get confused and they get distracted. You really have to figure out what's important for you, and you got to make it a habit. And the last thing is really difficult for me. You got to shut your mouth. And the S stands for silence. You got to keep it a secret. So if Chris Lengyel wants to write a book, my best advice to you is don't tell a soul until it's ready to be published. If Chris Lengyel wants to be at the Madison Square Garden, don't even talk about it until you're selling tickets. If Greg Dwyer wants to come out with his new book or his new card deck on Focus, don't tell anybody. And what I've discovered is the more you talk about something to people, the less likely it's ever going to happen. And so IHS is my formula for success and focus.
Man, no wonder I can never get anything done because I can't ever shut up about my goals. Wow. Okay. You gotta be really, loose lips sink ships. And what I've learned, and really the science is there if you trust the science. I mean, I don't know about science these days, but what I learned is the more you talk about something to people, the more your brain thinks you already done it. So you can talk to yourself about it, like self-talk. But the more you go around saying to people, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write a book, your brain thinks you already did it. And so there's no cognitive dissonance, there's no tension, So what I've learned over the years is number one, you have to know what's important. Number two, you have to make it a habit, which is done behind the scenes where no one's watching. In other words, you got to make the calls, you got to do the prospecting, you got to do the follow-up. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a habit. And then lastly, you got to keep your mouth quiet. You really do. You're a magician. You got to keep it a secret. Yeah, sometimes it's just really hard to do because you get excited about the stuff. But, I've also heard that, I've heard for years, and I follow it. Not really religiously, but very strongly, that if you put something out into the universe, eventually it'll come true. Like if you write something down on a piece of paper, like say, I want to make X amount of money this year, or I want to travel to X amount of states this year. If you write it down, subliminally in your mind, it gives you a goal to reach. So I wouldn't have thought about that because you basically right now just explained the opposite of what I'm so used to.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with writing something down. In fact, you asked me earlier, how did I end up traveling the world? I went to Fiji one time. It was amazing, but I wrote it down like 8-9 years before.
Yeah.
But I didn't go around blabbing to people that I was going to go to Fiji, especially my family. My family would have laughed at me. So I think what we're talking about is really spell work. I mean, you think about it, anybody that's involved with creating a spell, is a trance, and it begins with words, and it begins with writing words down. But it doesn't begin with going around flabbergasting and telling everybody about it, because the more you speak it out to friends and family, the more you're not going to have the ability to get it done. So what I do is I write things down, and I say things to myself, and I put it out there like a spell, like an intention, like, this is what I want for Chris Lengyel. I want health. I want abundance for you. You see what I'm saying? And, I'm not going around telling everybody that, but my energy and my focus, it's almost like a prayer.
Right. So we have about 10, 12 minutes left of this because I kind of want to keep it just over an hour. You lose track of time when you're enjoying a conversation or you're having a good time. And, there's something that you've talked about in the past that I heard this the first time, and I want you to talk more in depth about this. It's actually, it's a psychological fact. And you can correct me on the exact numbers if you would like, but apparently the average person has between 40,000 and 60,000 thoughts per day. Am I on the right track there?
What I read was 45 to 65,000 thoughts. So it's 45 to 65,000 thoughts every single day, and 90% of them are the same the next day. Right.
Let's think about that for a second, all right? Because
sounds like Groundhog Day.
It's almost the definition of insanity if you think about it, because the definition of insanity is doing something over and over again expecting a different result. But if you've got so many thoughts and so many ideas and things that go through your head every single day, and 90% of them are the same the next day, it really makes you wonder why you think the way you do, and what exactly are you thinking about to or not thinking about. to have all of these thoughts, the same. So how have you seen that? Like have you noticed that in your life? Have you been able to use that fact to try and change things about your habits or your lecture or some of the way you do things?
Absolutely. So what's today? Yesterday was February 2nd, right? So what's today? Today the 3rd? Is
Yes.
that true? Okay. So I watched this movie. I've watched it for years. Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. Have you seen the movie?
It's one of Bill Murray's best movies as far as I'm concerned. But nothing beats Caddyshack.
I love the movie. Rise and shine, campers, and don't forget your booties because it's cold outside, right? So every single day he wakes up with the same patterns, with the same things going on all the time. And it reminds me of this concept of 45 to 65,000 thoughts every single day. Most people, the reason why they don't reach their dreams and live to their full potential is they're more concerned with their comfort zone. And what brings comfort is things being the same every single day. And so people go into a lull. So what I came up with, and I didn't share this with you, but it just came out at Christmas time this year, is called the Focus Deck. I have a deck of cards, 52 cards plus 2 jokers, and the 2 jokers are named Misdirection, like M-I-S, direction. It's kind of play on words.
Okay.
And the 52 cards all have motivational sayings, like stay positive, think successful. There's only one rule in life, and that is to love yourself. No fears, no limits. Imagination is the first step to reality. Be unique, be yourself, be a visionary. Free yourself to fly with your imagination. So there's 52 sayings on this pack of cards. So I just did a prototype. I did I think 10 decks, and I got them on Christmas Eve. Absolutely fell in love with them. And so what I'm doing is I'm using the card deck to change the way I think, because number one, I've memorized the deck from top to bottom. Number two, I encourage people to use the deck every single day, or in some cases every single week, because there's 52 cards in the deck, there's 52 weeks in the year, so they're like mantras. But I really believe the secret to this is, number one, you have to figure out what's important. If you think of a triangle, at the top of the triangle is what's really important to you, whether that's money, family, fame, security, whatever that thing is. But you have to conform 3 things. I call it the TWA. You have to conform your thoughts, your words, and your actions in alignment to what you want. So let's say you want to be a millionaire, or you want to have $100,000 in savings or something like that, or you want to be debt-free. You have to be able to identify that as your number one thing that you're going after. And then number 2, you have to align your thoughts internally, your words to yourself, and your actions. And you have to get off autopilot, because autopilot, TWA, is going to take you in the wrong direction. You're going to be influenced by the world, the media, your friends, the environment. So you have to literally brainwash yourself to move towards what you want. And so I use the deck of cards, and eventually at my lectures, I will be selling the deck of cards. And I've been getting positive feedback from my friends and family, mostly friends, not really family, that I've given the deck to, and followed up a month or so later, and they're like, oh, I love this deck. It's positive. It helps me to stay focused.
I would love a deck of that deck of cards. I would love a deck.
Sure, next time I see you, I'll bring you a deck.
Because the magician in me is thinking, okay, well, we can definitely use sleight of hand and magic in order to, try to get the point across with that. So, I mean, that could be something that could be utilized for both motivation and entertainment.
Well, I do. So you didn't see this in Granby because I didn't have it. But one of the points that I make is, once you figure out what's important to you and you're able to unlock your potential to get it, the next step is you have to figure out what's important to other people. And so what I do is I walk out into the audience with the deck of cards, I shuffle it, I have somebody pick a card, and then I do a reading. I say to them, all right, Chris, this is what I know about you. This is the feedback that I'm getting from you. And I'm able to, really focus on what's important to them. and then what's important specifically about the card that they selected. So I do use it. In fact, the last lecture I did was last month in Massachusetts, and the response that I got at the end of the lecture, people came up to me and said, how do I get that pack of cards? And I thought to myself, this is product placement. This is wonderful.
Oh, it's marketing at its finest. But you know what it reminds me of, and you might you might take this as a compliment, and I'm not saying that it was probably influenced by it. Do you remember the show In and of Itself?
Oh my goodness, I've seen it on Broadway.
Yeah.
And yes, where are you going with that?
It reminds me of at the very end of the show, and I don't care if I spoil it because it's not on Broadway anymore, of when he's going through the audience and telling everybody what their cards are.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's kind of nice, and I haven't done this, is once I get to the point of her unlocking the box or him unlocking the box and retrieving whatever is important to them, I go out into the audience and I do a reading. And the reading is just based on intuition, really, and a little bit of sleight of hand. But when I bring them back, I do this connection ritual where I show people the reason why this works is because we're all connected. Everybody wants to thrive. Everybody wants to survive. We have different ways of getting there. But in reality, we're really all connected. And so once that's over, I bring the host that, brought me in, to have me speak. And I say, oh, by the way, and then I go into a reading with that person that's very much like In and of Itself. I don't know if I lifted it from there, but the reactions that I get at the end, because they don't expect it, they're totally blown away. They think that I've forgotten about them, but at the very end, they're like the last girl that we did a lecture of in Massachusetts, what was important to her was happiness. And I think the card she picked had to do with having the ability to get that. And I wrote it down and I said, look, I want you to read this. And you could see a shift in her. And that's what I'm really looking for.
Yeah, and that's also about leaving a lasting impression, which is, something that's very important because that'll either get you booked again or it'll get people talking about you so that way other people can book you. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap this up in just a little bit, but I want to say this has been an absolute pleasure. I know my interviewing skills are still, I still got to work on them, but I feel like we were able to pull this off.
Well, no, you were fabulous. I mean, I don't know about you, but you did a great job, and I mean that sincerely. A lot of people can't do this, Chris.
I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about earlier, when I got to the gallery, because that's where I am right now. I record all of my podcasts at the Main Street Gallery, and it's my safe haven, basically. And I was thinking, should I write the questions down, or should I just shoot from the hip and make it sound authentic? And then I was like, I did that with Rich, and it ended up working out pretty well, and I might as well try it with you. So, I mean, if you thought it was a good interview, then I think I'm onto something here. I might want to get some more people on this podcast and actually try to figure out how to record something properly instead of having to use two phones and Zoom. But with that being said, Greg, how do people find you? How could people learn more about you? And if people wanted to get involved with you and possibly work with you, where do they go? What do they do? And this is your time. Just, promote yourself.
Well, I tell you, the best thing that's ever happened to me, one of the best things, is back in 1992, a guy by the name of Orville came to my office and said, you need to buy GregDwyer.com. And I'm like, for what? He said, listen, we need to go on the internet and see if GregDwyer.com is available. So that was back in 1992, which is 30 years ago. So the best way for people to get a hold of me is GregDwyer.com. That's Greg, D as in day, W as in Wednesday, Y as in yesterday, ER.com. I also own GregDwyer.org. And I think GregDwyer.net will also take you to a few places as well. But the best thing is just go to my name, GregDwyer.org or GregDwyer.com. If you want to take the quiz to see how focused you are, go to GregDwyer.org. It takes, what is it, Chris? Take 5 seconds to take the quiz?
It took me like 30.
Yeah. It took you 30 seconds or 30 minutes?
No, it took me about 30 seconds. It also probably didn't help I didn't have the best connection, but I mean, it's a quick 7-question thing.
Yeah, I would say the best thing to do is just to go to gregdwyer.com or gregdwyer.org. And if you want to get on the radio station, you can follow me. The best way to read the book, the ebook that Chris talked about, is go to gregdwyer.org, and there's an offer there, a pop-up, where you can get the ebook, five secrets to your success.
Do you have anything coming up that people can actually see you at?
I've been booking, I shouldn't be telling you this because I should keep it a secret, but I started back in June of last year reaching out to businesses and libraries and, corporate events. I just booked one today, 2 yesterday. I have 3 next week. A lot of these events are private, but I'm really excited. My calendar is filled. I'm booked out until June, Chris. It's insane.
You and I both. I'm booked out until at least November or December, but
that's great.
That's also a theater tour. That's not including private stuff.
Right.
Greg, it has been an absolute pleasure. I really want to thank you for taking the time and coming on here today. This is probably one of the better podcasts I think I've ever done, and you are absolutely more than welcome to come back on anytime you want or anytime I get bored and want you on again.
It was great, Chris. I really appreciate it. You did a fantastic job, and I mean that sincerely.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And guys, please do me a favor. If you have not already, go and check out Greg on all social media. Go and check out his website. Go take that test. And most importantly, go ahead and subscribe to me, the Magician with a Microphone podcast. Guys, I want to thank Greg one more time for coming on. And I'm going to call it a night. This is Chris Lengyel with Chris Lengyel Magic signing off. Thank you for listening, guys.